The woman raised the photograph. Dean Martin stopped singing. The orchestra played 3 more bars and fell silent. Dean lowered his microphone. He couldn't speak. Copa Room. Sands Hotel. Las Vegas. February 1967. The room held 200 people. Businessmen. High rollers. Women in evening gowns. Cigarette smoke hanging in the spotlights like ghosts. Dean Martin on stage in his black tuxedo, bow tie perfect, hair perfect, that smile that made America forget their troubles. He was halfway through. Everybody Loves Somebody. The song that had knocked the Beatles off the charts. His signature. His armor. The orchestra swung behind him, brass section tight, piano rolling, drums keeping that easy 4/4 that made everything feel effortless. Dean never worked hard on stage. That was the secret. Frank sweated. Sammy dazzled. Dean just existed, and somehow that was enough. Cool wasn't effort. Cool was the absence of effort. But cool has a price. And sometimes the bill comes due in front of 200 witnesses. The woman sat in the front row. Table 4. Dean had noticed her when he walked on stage 20 minutes ago. You notice certain things when you've performed 10,000 nights. The ones who don't drink. The ones who don't laugh at the jokes. The ones who sit perfectly still while everyone around them moves. She was maybe 55. Dark dress. Pearl necklace. Hands folded in her lap. Eyes that never left Dean's face. He'd seen that look before. Stage door mothers. Obsessive fans. Women who confused the performance with the man. He'd learned to ignore it. Smile past it. Keep singing. But halfway through the second verse, she stood up. The orchestra didn't notice. Neither did the audience. But Dean saw. You don't survive Vegas without peripheral vision sharp enough to catch trouble before it arrives. She reached into her purse. Slowly. Deliberately. Drew out something small. A photograph. Old by the look of it. Black and white. Worn edges. The kind of photo you carry for decades until it becomes soft as cloth. She held it up at chest level. Facing Dean. 10 feet between them. The spotlight caught it just enough for Dean to see. His voice faltered. Just for a second. Half a syllable lost. The kind of mistake no civilian would notice but every musician in the room felt. Dean Martin didn't make mistakes. The orchestra kept playing. They'd rehearsed this arrangement 100 times. Muscle memory carried them forward while Dean's brain tried to process what his eyes were seeing. The photograph showed 2 people. A young man in a navy uniform. A young woman in a simple dress. Standing in front of a courthouse. The man was smiling. The woman was crying. Happy tears, you could tell. Even from 10 feet away. Even across 26 years. Dean stopped singing. His mouth stayed open for a moment, the last note dying in his throat. The orchestra played on, trumpet hitting its mark, piano rolling through the changes, drums swinging steady. 3 more bars. Then the bandleader, Lou, noticed. His baton faltered. He looked at Dean, then at the musicians, then back at Dean. The trumpet player glanced up from his music. The piano rolled to a stop. The drums hit one more beat and went silent. The room realized something was wrong. Dean didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. The room understood anyway. 200 people. Conversations dying mid-sentence. Cigarettes pausing halfway to lips. Ice cubes frozen in glasses. All eyes on the man in the tuxedo who wasn't smiling anymore. Dean lowered the microphone slowly. It hung at his side, still connected to the stand by a coiled cable. His other hand came up slightly, not quite reaching toward the woman, not quite warding her off. Just hovering in the space between them. Where did you get that? His voice barely carried past the first 3 tables. The room leaned forward to hear. The woman didn't answer immediately. She just held the photograph steady. Waiting. Dean took 1 step toward the edge of the stage. The spotlight followed him automatically, The operator doing his job even when the script had been abandoned. I asked you a question? Still quiet. Still controlled. But something underneath now. Something that made the waiter stop moving. Something that made the bartender forget to pour. The woman's voice was soft but clear. You know where I got it, Dean. You were there when it was taken. The room held its breath. Dean Martin stood under the spotlight, the microphone dead in his hand, staring at a photograph of himself at age 23, standing outside a courthouse in Steubenville, Ohio, June 1941, married to a girl named Elizabeth and McDonald, Betty, whom he'd loved before the fame, before Vegas, before he became someone who could fill the Copa Room, before he became someone who forgot that version of himself existed. To understand what happened next, you need to understand 1941. Dean wasn't Dean Martin then. He was Dino Crocetti, son of an Italian barber, working small clubs around Ohio, singing for tips, dreaming of something bigger but not quite believing it would happen. Betty McDonald worked at the counter of a diner in Steubenville. Pretty. Smart. Practical in ways Dean wasn't. She'd seen him perform at a local club, not the Copa Room, not even close, just a smoky basement where factory workers drank away their shifts, and she'd liked his voice but loved his nervousness. The way he couldn't quite hide how much he wanted it. They'd dated for 6 months. He'd proposed in the parking lot of her diner, no ring, just a promise that he'd buy one as soon as he made it. She'd said yes because she believed in the version of him that still existed under the ambition. They got married at the courthouse because neither family could afford a wedding. A buddy from Dean's band took the photograph. Dino in his one good suit that he'd borrowed. Betty in a dress her sister had altered. Both of them grinning like they'd won something. The marriage lasted 4 years. Dean's career started catching momentum. Bigger clubs, better money, longer trips away from home. Betty wanted stability. Dean wanted stages. They grew into different people who happened to share an apartment. The divorce was quiet. No drama. No headlines because Dean wasn't headlines yet. Betty moved back to Steubenville. Dean moved to New York, then LA, then Vegas. He remarried. Had kids. Built an empire. And he'd carefully, methodically, never spoken about Betty McDonald again. Not in interviews. Not in his autobiography. Not to his second wife or his children. That version of Dino Crocetti stayed locked in a courthouse in Ohio, young and broke and foolish enough to think love was enough. Until tonight, when Betty's sister walked into the Copa Room carrying proof that you can't perform away your past. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. I'm Margaret, the woman said, still holding the photograph. Betty's sister. You remember me, Dean? Dean's jaw tightened. Where's Betty? Margaret's eyes filled with tears, but her voice stayed steady. She died 3 months ago. Cancer. She fought for 2 years. The words hit Dean like a closed fist. His hand tightened on the dead microphone. The spotlight felt too hot suddenly. Too bright. Exposing too much. Why are you here? Because she asked me to come. Margaret reached into her purse again. Drew out an envelope. She wanted you to have this. And she wanted you to know something. Margaret. She never blamed you. Margaret's voice cracked now, the composure fracturing. For any of it. For leaving. For the divorce. For becoming someone else. She understood. She told me that 2 weeks before she died. She said Dino had to leave to become Dean. I couldn't have held on to him without killing what made him special. Dean stood frozen. The room so quiet you could hear the ice melting in the abandoned drinks. Margaret took 2 steps closer to the stage. Close enough to hand Dean the envelope. She kept this photograph her whole life. In her wallet. Every day for 26 years. And she wanted you to know that she was proud of you. That she watched your career. That she told her friends I knew him when. That loving you, even for just those 4 years, was the best thing that ever happened to her. Dean took the envelope with a hand that trembled slightly. The first time anyone in that room had seen Dean Martin's hands shake. He opened it carefully. Inside was a single piece of paper. Betty's handwriting. He recognized it immediately, the careful loops, the way she dotted her I's with little circles. Dino. If Maggie is reading this to you, I'm gone. I'm writing this from my hospital bed, and the doctors say I have about a month. I'm not scared. I've had a good life. I wanted you to know something I never told you when we were young. You were right to leave. I was angry for a long time. But I came to understand that some people are meant for small lives and some people are meant for stages. You were always meant for stages. I married again, by the way. A good man. A teacher. We had 2 daughters. They're grown now, with kids of their own. I had a happy life, Dean. Not the life we planned in that courthouse, but a good one. I kept your photograph because it reminded me that I was loved once by someone who went on to be loved by the world. That's something special. I watched you on TV whenever you were on. I bought all your records. When Everybody Loves Somebody came out, I played it so much my husband joked I'd wear out the needle. He knew about you. I never hid it. He understood. I don't need anything from you. No apology. No regret. I just wanted you to know, I forgive you for leaving, and I hope someday you forgive yourself for whatever guilt you've been carrying. You made the right choice. And because you made it, millions of people got to hear that voice. That matters more than one small life in Steubenville. Be happy, Dino. You earned it. Love always. Betty. Dean read it twice. The room waited. 200 people watching the King of Cool read a letter from a woman they'd never heard of, watching his face do things they'd never seen it do. When he looked up, his eyes were wet. Not crying. Not quite. But wet in a way that made every person in that room understand they were seeing something real. Off camera, Dean made a choice no one expected, because it wasn't for the cameras. Dean folded the letter carefully. Put it in his inside jacket pocket. Right over his heart. Then he looked at Margaret. Did she suffer? Not at the end. They gave her good medication. She was at home. Her daughters were with her. She talked about you the day before she died. Said she hoped you were still singing. Dean nodded slowly. Then he did something no one in the Copa Room had ever seen him do. He sat down. Right there on the edge of the stage. Legs hanging over. Microphone still in his hand but forgotten. The spotlight operator, confused, kept the light on him. The audience didn't know what to do. This wasn't part of the show. This wasn't entertainment. This was Dean Martin being Dino Crocetti for the first time in 26 years. I loved her, Dean said quietly, more to himself than to Margaret or the room. I did. I loved this more. He gestured vaguely at the stage, the lights, the room. And I didn't know how to do both. She knew, Margaret said softly. That's why she forgave you. Dean looked at the photograph still in Margaret's hand. Can I keep that? Margaret walked to the edge of the stage and handed it to him. Dean took it like it was made of glass. Stared at the young man in the borrowed suit who had no idea what was coming. The failures. The success. The choices that would define him. The woman he'd leave behind to become someone else. Thank you for bringing it, Dean said, his voice rough. And thank you for telling me about Betty. I should have called. Should have checked on her. She didn't expect you to. She said you lived in different worlds. Dean laughed once, bitter and brief. Yeah. I guess we did. He stood up slowly. The room watched him reassemble himself, the shoulders straightening, the mask sliding back into place. But something had shifted. Everyone could feel it. Dean turned to the orchestra. Lou, the bandleader, sat with his baton raised, waiting. Lou, Dean said quietly, let's do your nobody till somebody loves you. Slow. Real slow. Lou nodded. The orchestra began. Soft. Gentle. Like a prayer. Dean sang. But this time, he wasn't performing. He was remembering. Every word meant something now. Every note carried weight. Margaret sat back down in the front row, crying silently. The audience understood what they were witnessing, not entertainment, but eulogy. When the song ended, Dean didn't smile. Didn't bow. He just said, "Thank you for coming tonight, folks. And thank you, Margaret, for bringing her back to me." Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten. The show ended quietly. No encore. No jokes. Dean walked off stage carrying the photograph and the letter. He never spoke about Betty McDonald publicly again. But after that night, he carried the courthouse photo in his wallet. Next to pictures of his children. Next to his driver's license. Every single day for the rest of his life. And sometimes, late at night in his dressing room, he'd take out the letter and read it. Remembering the boy who had to leave. And the woman who understood why.